Aloha there. And let's just start with where I said we'll talk to. Yeah, going through years and that was from 1889 to 1889. From Menelik II to Ottawa. Until 1889 through 1913. Ethiopia, roughly its current form began under the reign of Menelik II, who was emperor from 1889 until the death in 1913. From his base in the central province of Shewa, Menelik set out to annex territories to the south, east, and west. Areas inhabited by the Oromo, Sidama, Igora, Walata, and other peoples. He achieved this with the help of Ras, Roma, Dachis, Shewa, Omra militia, which occupied lands that have been held since Ethiopian rule during the conquest of the Oromo. The Ethiopian army carried out atrocities against the Oromo population, including mass mutilation, mass killings, and large-scale slavery. Some estimates of the number of people killed as a result of conquest are in the millions. Showcasing a lot of things that occurred around this period, especially when it comes to people and what they experience. Some estimates of the number of people killed as a result of the conquest are in millions, yes, with large-scale atrocities were also committed against the Dizi people and the people of the kingdom of Kaffa. Menelik's campaign against Ormos outside his army was largely in retaliation for centuries of Oromo expansionism and the Zemeni Mesfit, a period during which a succession of Oromo feudal rulers dominated the Highlanders. Chief among these were the Yuzhul dynasty, which included Aligaz of Yizhul and his brother Ali Yizhul. The latter founded the town of Dibre Tabor in the Ara region, which began the dynasty's capital. Menelik II was the son of Hili Makont, Hus of Shewan, and Nishako Lemaho Adawal, a palace servant. He was born at Angola, in a rural area, and lived his first 12 years with Shewan Ormos, whom he thus have much in common. During Menelik's reign, road construction, electricity, and education advanced. A central taxation system was developed. The city of Fini was rebuilt and renamed Addis Ababa in 1889 through 1891. It became the new capital of the Ethiopian Empire. For his leadership, despite the opposition from more traditional elements of society, Menelik II was heralded as a national hero. He signed the Treaty of Wuchol with Italy in May 1889, by which Italy would recognize Ethiopia's sovereignty so long as Italy could control an area north of Ethiopia and part of modern Eritrea. In return, Italy was to provide Menelik with weapons to support him as emperor. The Italians used the time between the signing of the treaty and its ratification by the Italian government to expand their territorial claims. This first Italo-Ethiopian War culminated in the Battle of Adwa on 1st March 1896, in which Italy's colonial forces were defeated by the Ethiopians. In 1896, the Treaty of Addis Ababa was signed, replacing the Treaty of Wuchol with conditions more favorable to Ethiopia. About a third of the population died in the Great Ethiopian Famine, 1888 to 1890. So, yeah, that's actually a lot to cover. Because surprisingly, this is some Ethiopian history. I do know about the colonial expansion in Italy Lagos Menelik and General Ross Walda in 1879 through 1889. Oof. So yeah, I mean, this does talk about some of the interference they had from its last time I read this. When it came to, was it some Europeans and even Americans having an influence around the region, particularly around the Red Sea because of trading. And when it came to internal issues where most different types of population around the area were being subjugated, but in this case, in the millions, they experienced suffering. And yeah, it's a bloody part of their history. Paraphrasing what they said here in this page that I read. Conquest of Rome, Punjab, the extension of the empire in 1879 through 1889. Yeah, I believe this is a French. No, it's French. Just only can read some of it. Yeah. Okay, so 1913, now this is 1916 through 1974. Alrighty. Haile Selassie the First era. The early 20th century was marked by the reign of Emperor Haile Selassie Rastafi. Haile Selassie I was born to parents with ethnic links to three Afro-Zenek speaking populations of Ethiopia, the Oromo and Amharic, the country's two largest ethnic groups, as well as the Guraj. He came to power after Liege Shul was disposed and undertook a nationwide modernization campaign. From 1916, when he was made a Ras Regent Garasi for the Empress Zetitu, and became the de facto ruler of the Ethiopian Empire. Following Zeduti's death on 2nd November 1930, he succeeded her as emperor. In 1931, Haile Selassie endowed Ethiopia with its first ever constitution in emulation of Imperial Japan's 1890 constitution, through which the Central Europe a model of unity and homogeneous ethno-linguistic nation-state was adopted for the Ethiopian Empire. And right on the right side, Emperor Haile Selassie first had his study in Jubilee Palace in 1922. Okay, so it looks like there's no pictures of Menelik II, I believe. Because I wonder if they didn't show it or not. But they do have Haile Selassie. So this man's role around, his role around the First World War, the interwar period, and the Second World War. Yeah, something I also remember in Ethiopia history is that there's actually a good long extension of why Italy couldn't conquer Ethiopia. One good part is Ethiopia had a limited military that was trained as a modern military. They actually had weapons, guns and firearms. That was from Russia, the Empire of Russia, due to the connection of Orthodox Christianity, along with some political matters, it being a Orthodox Christian state. That, and also when it came to commotions with Italy and some European powers in the West, I figured they wanted to undermine. That's a good gist of what I do know about that, too. But yeah, Haile Selassie, I do know him because, he doesn't, Fascist Italy occupation. Okay, yeah. So they actually do talk about it in its own section. But yeah, I do know him, Halassi, because of Ethiopia. Before the Second World War, or what World War II officially started, there was the Italian campaign to conquer Ethiopia or Abyssinia around that region. This was during the until war period and the lead up or build up to World War II. They did fought around that area during World War II in the North African campaign, so I do know that Italy had some colonies per se. For that, I don't even know much about, so we'll see. Fascist Italy occupation, 1936 through 1941. The independence of Ethiopia was interrupted by the Second Italian-Ethiopian War, beginning when it was invaded by Fascist Italy in early October 1935 and by subsequent Italian rule of the country 1936 through 1941. After Italian victory in the war. During this time, Haile Selassie exiled and appealed to the League of Nations in 1935, delivering an address that made him a worldwide figure in the 1935 Time Man of the Year. Yeah, it's around that time Hitler also sold that. I think that was around, after 1935. I'm not quite sure. As the majority of the Ethiopian population lived in rural towns, Italy faced continued resistance and ambushes in urban centers throughout its rule over Ethiopia. Haile Selassie fell into exile in Fairfield House, Bath, England. Mussolini was unable to proclaim Italian Ethiopia and the assumption of the imperial title by the Italian king Vittorio Emanuele III. In 1937, the Italian massacre at Yigatit 12 took place, in which between 1,400 and 30,000 civilians were killed and many others imprisoned. This massacre was a reprisal for the attempted assassination of Rudolf Granzani, the viceroy of Italian East Africa. The Italians employed the use of exfoliating. Oh man, I can't pronounce it. But yeah, exfoliating chemical weapons in their Ethiopian invasion. The Italians regularly dropped bombs throughout Italy that carried mustard gas and debilitated the Ethiopian forces. On the whole, the Italians dropped about 300 tons of mustard gas as well as thousands of other artillery. This use of chemical weapons were among the erroneous war crimes. The Italians made investments in Ethiopian infrastructure development during their rule over Ethiopia. They created the so-called Imperial Road between Addis Ababa and Masara. More than 900 kilometers of railways were constructed, dams and hydroelectric plants were built, and many public and private companies were established. The Italian government abolished slavery, a practice that existed in the country for centuries. Following the entry of Italy into World War II, British Empire forces, together with the Arbegonos, literary patriots referring to the armed resistance soldiers, liberated Ethiopia in the course of the East African Campaign in 1941. An Italian guerrilla warfare campaign continued into 1943. The country was placed under British military administration. This was followed by British recognition of Ethiopia's full sovereignty without any special British privileges when the Angola-Ethiopia Agreement was signed in December 1944, although some regions remained under British control for 4 years. Under the Peace Treaty of 1947, Italy recognized the sovereignty and independence of Ethiopia. On 22nd August 1942, Haile Selassie issued a proclamation that removed legal basis for slavery. Ethiopia had between 2 and 4 million slaves in the early 20th century, out of the total population of about 11 million. So this is around is interesting though that because going back from the last paragraph page, that he based the Constitution on the Empire of Japan. It was right at the start. It was also having some colonies, but I figured it was also the modernization period. After all, he was the person who did that. Also, it's a poetic. In poetic literature, it's poetic irony. They Italy invaded a Japanese. Well, what is it? Spain also was about to go. Well, we're having some issues with Japan to the point that there was a military escalation with some other. Even though there were some embedded with the Axis, particularly the Italian and the German fascists. They actually sent military troops advisors in a non-official role. This goes to one of the American things. But yeah, that's just what my mind came up. But yeah, he abolished slavery because during the time slavery was abolished. I take it that because when it comes to fascist Italy, they don't want to deal with any issues of assimilation, where since Italy didn't have slavery in their own country or in their colonies, they don't want to have it either. That and also created a huge issue on their own side. But they still have to suffer through freedom fighters or patriots that fighting, which later joined to the British when it came to World War II started, and the British were doing their North African campaign, pushing down Italians and Germans, actually annexed Ethiopia and surrounding areas and gave full sovereignty to the Walasi. Which, goes around, comes around. And also when it came to the use of chemical warfare, yeah, that's something I was to think about because the Japanese also used chemical warfare when it came to the Chinese, and you also have the Italians with Africans, the Ethiopians, but the area of Abyssinia, where in most of the World War II they really didn't use any chemical weapons. So it just seems strange that when it came to the early events in the war, or in this case from China, I think they were still using warfare in that campaign throughout the Second World War. But yeah, I digress where this part of chemical warfare was used during the World War II around that time frame, and people don't talk about that. And also, from what I remember in the military standpoint, that was the big deciding factor of how they invaded the country, the empire of Ethiopia. Which, yeah, the fact that they didn't have much of a modern military when it came to, especially when it comes to chemical weapons, it was such a deadly weapon to look at. So yeah, alrighty. So yeah, the post-World War II era, Federal Democratic to the present. Yeah, the presidency. So, I don't have enough time to read up post-World War II era. Next time, definitely. Also, these photos that we can add. So, Ross Seminole Mingosh, Ross Gitschwadat, and Ross Skiddaw with Benito Mussolini on 6 February 1937 in Rome, Italy, after the Italian occupation of Ethiopia, where they had to consider Ethiopian cavalry during the Second Italian-Ethiopian War in 1936. They look like they have some, well, British, but I also say Japanese. Maybe it's because of the clothing covering and stuff. And it could also be surplus from the British Empire. But yeah, they still use horses. Which, I mean, what is it? Just like typically that's how not modernized it is. But horses could still be reliable when it came to civilization gas in the 80s. Horses when it came to Afghanistan today. But yeah. But when it comes to fighting against planes and chemical weapons, yeah. It's hard to stand a chance. Maybe on the ground they actually did. There's a lot in learning, but well, a topic I did later. Anywho, aloha.